Welcome back to the imaginary gallery. It is TJ again. Tonight's discussion is about the narcissist, or the covert narcissist, or the cluster B monster in your life. And it's a discussion regarding cause and effect, which I've got two different viewpoints on this. So I'll begin with the first. And if you've ever dealt with such a person, you probably have thought of the possibility that this person does not understand the relationship between cause and effect. And this also ties in some of their other tactics or their other characteristics, such as their sense of entitlement and the fact that they're extremely self-centered. But when I'm referring to cause and effect, when you're dealing with such a cluster B person, if you just look at like the typical example, these people masquerade as something other than what they are. They go into other people's lives and pretend to be the person you've always looked for. And eventually, when things become discovered, what happens? Well, very often, their target fights back because their target realizes they've been made a fool of, which is a common response. If someone is like telling you they're in love with you, but you find out behind your back they're trying to date your mother or your father and don't plan to tell you, something like that, which is typical for this type, well, you may become enraged, you may take drastic measures, you may fight this person, you may do anything that's out of character for you. Yet the narcissistic personality disordered monster will react to your behavior as if you just did it out of the blue to them. And that's where we tie in the cause and effect. It's as if this person doesn't realize that none of these things would have happened if he or she had not done what he or she did, which is infiltrate someone's life, pretend to be their friend, and then try to destroy them behind their back. So again, it would seem like that person got what they deserved. If the person they were chasing beat them up or cut them off or did something, you would think that the cluster B person would look at itself and say, well, I guess I deserve this. I did scam him or her. But they don't do that. They have the sense of entitlement, which means that if they want something from someone and they know that that someone would have nothing to do with them if he or she knew what the deal was, well, they think they deserve it anyway. So they're going to scam, they're going to pretend, they're going to do anything and everything they can to pretend to be just like the target. And then if the target figures them out and retaliates, they're going to punish that target, never once realizing the relationship between cause and effect. If the narcissist didn't fake its way in, well, then these things never would have happened. But they don't see this, is how it would appear. Another example would be, I was involved with one of these people, actually a few, but one of them in particular, which was constantly pretending to be perfect and innocent, but then I would discover these secret liaisons it had with all these different partners in private, and I'd say, you know what, you're a whore. And I would hear responses like, if you think I'm a whore, then we shouldn't be friends. And I'd be like, cause and effect. I'd say, if you don't want me to call you a whore, then quit doing whore-like behaviors. It's as if they don't get the fact that the name whore is being called because of what's going on. Just like if your friend has come home every day of the week with something different he stole from some store, you may say, "You are a thief." And imagine the person saying, "Quit calling me a thief." Well, the logical response is, "I'll make you a deal. Quit stealing things every day, and I'll quit calling you a thief." It's as if they think they are entitled to steal or to be a whore and whatever else they want to do behind closed doors, away from your view. But if you happen to find out and you call it out for what it is, they're not in reality, because they're going to deny being whatever you're calling them, even though you could sit there and list the reasons why you're calling this name. Which I don't advocate name calling, but sometimes if they're out of control, you got to give them a label, and it's not a name calling, it's a matter of labeling the behavior for what it is. Which, if you've had 5 different partners this last week in your bedroom, you're a whore. Face it. And again, if you don't want to be called a whore, then cut down that number to 1 or 0. But there's no logic and reasoning with these types of people. And they love to, as I've stated before, paint themselves as a victim when you simply are pointing out obvious, truthful facts. So if you were to label that behavior, "Listen, whore thief," well, it's going to run to its flying monkeys and say, "He's so mean to me, he called me a whore and a thief." And of course, if they say, "Well, why would he do that?" there won't be any confessions. It'll be, "I don't know." Instead of, "Well, I did have 16 partners this past week, all different and several in the same day, and I did steal $1,000 worth of merchandise, but they won't say that. It'll just be, "I don't know." And first I was thinking of it, and I was framing it in the cause and effect, just assuming these people just don't get the relation between cause and effect. But then I've thought more about their nature and how they get off on negative energy vibrations, and figured another angle to look at this would be that because they're fake, because they're not really a real person, they're trying to pretend to be one, and because when you deal with one and you see all these strange discrepancies with, like, the way they claim to be, but then the things you see them do just don't always seem to fit together, well, that's another cause and effect deal, because they're pretending to be a different personality type than what they really are. And when you, the observer, says, "Hey, don't call yourself a vegetarian, I saw you wolfing down that hamburger last night," or something. But the other viewpoint is, this is possibly intentional, because they know there are people out there who are watching and listening, and if they identify as, let's say, vegetarian, for example, and they know that they're really not, and somebody catches them eating some juicy, bloody burger, well, there's going to be a confrontation of, "What are you eating that burger for? You said you're a vegetarian." And their game is to keep their normal, straight, fake face, and, "I am a vegetarian. I just ate this meat today because of," retarded excuse. And I think they get a thrill out of watching other people who are sensible, who have logic, and watching them try to debunk their retarded behaviors. And instead of giving in to such a thing, they will simply try to rewrite or override reality to make it so that it is possible for me to be a vegetarian and still have a bloody hamburger every other day. That's none of your concern. And that's not reality, obviously. But they will treat it as if they believe it is, and that just drives you, the listener, crazy, and that's exactly what they're after in many cases. They want to see you become unhinged. it gives them thrill, it gives them supply. So, like with the horror thing, it knows it's a horror, but it wants to play that victim role to make it look like you, the innocent bystander, is somehow some kind of abusive person, which allows kind of a projection or a reverse projection, because they're doing the things to get your attention. So then you point out the discrepancies, and then they capitalize on that by acting like you are being mean to them, which is retarded and disgusting and sick that people would actually spend their days and effort on creating such contradictions. But again, they love to be the victim, and typical of these types would be they would engage in several different behaviors, of which, in general, if you asked 10 people on the street, they'd probably all agree that whatever these things are bad, or things that are not things you'd be proud of, yet they're doing them. And when you call it out to say, hey, you robbed 10 people, you beat up 7 people, you stole that stuff from the store, you're a criminal. Well, they'd be like, don't you call me a criminal, I only did those things because, and it's like, save the excuses. They don't want to be accountable. That's one of their other traits, lack of accountability. That it's her fault she left her money out in her purse and I saw it, so I stole it. It's their fault. They were too loud, so I beat them up. And so on. They have excuses for all of it. But the point is, with the excuses, it doesn't change what was done. So I don't know if it's really that they don't recognize cause and effect. I think they do recognize it, and they deliberately play games with those around them just so they can pretend to act calm and normal and regular, and that you are unhinged and you are out of order because you're daring to call them what they actually are. And this ties into one other concept which I find interesting, which is the concept of karma. If you've ever known a cluster B sociopath slash narcopath slash psychopath, narcissistic personality, whatever it is, whichever one, don't believe them if they claim to believe in karma, because face it, how could you ever even conceive of the idea that one of these cluster B monster people could ever believe in a concept such as karma with the way they run their lives? Now come on. They deliberately pretend to be something other than what they are, to fool others into giving them the things they want. Now, do you honestly think if a person really believed that whatever they do, good or bad, comes back to them, would actually do that to someone repeatedly on a regular basis? I don't think so. I had an interesting conversation with one of these people who claimed to believe in karma and gave me a fictitious story full of plot holes. And then one time I figured I'd catch it off guard and said one day, just out of the blue, like, hey, question for you. If one day you're driving down the street and you see some lady and she's sitting next to her truck on the street and she's got problems, and you find out that her truck broke down and she needs some water or she needs some gas or she needs something, I said, do you think that if you were to stop and help her out so she could get back on the road and gone, do you think that that would increase the chances that if one day you were stranded, that someone would help you? And the answer was no, which would signify no belief in karma. However, the same person had given a story previously about how he believes in karma, and this phony story which was retarded. And I think, okay, either you do or you don't, because karma isn't just if you do good, good comes back to you, or it's not just if you do bad, then bad comes back to you. It's either or. So it's kind of sickening to hear the same person claiming both sides, which leads to cognitive dissonance unless you realize just how retarded this person is. But as far as karma goes, my personal belief, I think there's a lot of information we've not been taught about the way this world works, the way the energy fields are in this planet and elsewhere, and believe there's a lot of suppressed information, and that there is a balance in this universe. So in relation to karma, I believe there is a relation between what we do versus what comes to us, but I think with these cluster B monsters, they start so early being so evil to others that they will reject the entire idea of karma because they'd be dead, they'd be useless, they'd be history, because think of all the evil they do. And I think the way with them, they live in a very severe state of denial. Because I've seen, for example, in my own situation, because karma, this balance, this nature's balance that's there, whether we like it or not, it isn't necessarily exclusive to, like if I sneak over next door and steal a neighbor's egg from her basket, if she doesn't come by my house and steal my egg, well, if I'm this cluster B, I might think, ooh, I got away with it. Or if I go murder some neighbor and run and hide and nobody ever finds out, well, that's going to reinforce my idea that there's no karma. I murdered my neighbor and got away with it. Well, that's not the way it necessarily works, because I've known plenty of cluster Bs who act recklessly and do whatever they want for their own selfish purposes and never think about it twice. And then later I see disasters occur in their lives, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this person doesn't believe in karma, but I see some pretty bad luck coming. But you know what they do? They use their denial skills. So they may go murder the neighbor and then sneak and get away with it and think, wow, I'm invincible. And then like a few months later, their car gets smashed or broken into or some other unrelated. And because it's not directly related, I think that a lot of times these people will excuse it away by thinking, well, nobody stole my egg, so there's no karma. Well, even though my car got stolen last week, but they won't put that together. They won't think that this terrible thing had any relationship to the evil they did, so they're off the hook. And I think they live this way, and I'm afraid that in the end, whatever happens, there's going to be hell to pay. They'll have to deal with that one on their own.
What's the matter? Don't you recognize me? I'm sure I look 10 years younger. I miss you. I'm the narcopath. I'm back. I heard that you've been spying on me. That ain't cool. I would recommend against it in the future. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Who cares if I stole your private documents? Who cares if I attempted to commit identity theft? You deserved it because you left your papers out. You were stupid enough to leave your birth certificate where I could get it, so you deserve to have identity theft. So don't go blaming me. Don't go sending the police out after me. You're to blame. You shouldn't have left that stuff out.
I am the narcopath. The narcopath! I am the narcopath. And another gripe I have at this cloning center is that I was chosen to be a female vocalist. However, after seeing so many movie moguls there, I decided, you know what? I want to be an actress too. I want to be on all the big screens with all the fancy actors, and you know what? They weren't interested. It appears the people in charge of such decisions are pedophiles who want only young boys. Which means I should have stayed a boy if I wanted to be a star on the screen. But we'll see. We'll just see what happens with it.
I found this little creature running around the cloning center. I couldn't get in, but this little creature got out, and I grabbed him. He's sweet, isn't he? Aren't you sweet little creature, whatever you are? I don't know if it's a cat, a dog, a rat, or some other kind of rodent. You're my baby now.
I am a human clone.